This is Duke University.
My name is Sean Peoples, and I'm a Program Associate and Multimedia Editor at the Woodrow Wilson Center's Environmental Change and Security Program. At the Woodrow Wilson Center, primarily my duties revolve around kind of capturing insights on topics that were of great interest to us. We have a cooperative agreement with USAID that helps us look at HELPS topics. HELPS is an acronym we use for health and environment, livelihoods, population, and security. We look at the similarities, the connections, some of the things that don't connect in those sets of issues. And so I try to tell stories around those topics so that a general audience and our policymakers can gain more understanding of how those things connect and how some of them don't. So I took a videographer with me, and we produced a 10-minute documentary called Healthy People, Healthy Environment, Integrated Development in Tanzania along the northern coastline in Pangani district.
The seemingly simple act of cooking the day's meal was helping to destroy Tanzania's Saadani National Park and the surrounding forests, where community members cut wood for fuel even though it is forbidden by law.
When you discuss borders, and I think for this kind of work, for this integrated work, some of the things that we're trying to do is actually kind of remove some of the borders. Remove the borders from partners like, or from organizations like conservation groups or health groups. Remove those borders to say that you guys can work together. Use the different partnerships to actually impact a community by making these interventions cheaper.
The oil stoves, you have to face the smoke. Smoking is too much. For the health benefit, that's very important. So this one, there's very minimal smoke, which for us, health part is very important.
Along with the health and environment benefits, the energy-saving stove affords more time to focus on improving livelihoods and generating income, especially for women.
It takes a look at 3 different women who have been empowered by this integrated approach, trying to both conserve the environment around them, the areas surrounded by a national park where the forests are being raised for charcoal and cooking fuel. And at the same time, trying to actually give them a little bit more access to the kinds of health needs, clinics, reproductive health access, that takes also a kind of more integrated approach along with the conservation side.
Clean cook stoves are part of the solution. The need exists for a more holistic approach. The growing number of people dependent on local natural resources, trees for fuel, fish for subsistence, is unsustainable both economically and ecologically. Family planning and women's empowerment are key to a long-term integrated approach to addressing these problems.
There's so many different bridges we're trying to create in even coming to the idea of storytelling in film. We're looking at, obviously, a community that's impacted by several different challenges. We're looking at a community in the policy world that's trying to link these things, but doesn't necessarily sometimes have the dynamic model of communicating it. And then we're also, looking to tell a good story. So we knew that we had a lot of reports. We knew we had a lot of policy papers. But what we wanted to tell was a good story and show how these different communities, how these different topics can interact, can be better served by an integrated approach. One of the aspects of this kind of community-based programming that I think we can all learn from is that we go in, or these projects go in, we're just documenting them. And they're learning from the community. There's a lot to learn from years of that context-specific rural community. They know their community best. They know what they need. And in some ways, I think that's where we need to really flip the dynamic. There's so much we need to be learning from these places that we go in and asking questions, a lot of questions first, and not necessarily knowing the answers before we get there.
Through the PHE approach, these women are now empowered to better use their resources, to plan their families, and to improve their livelihoods.
When you're setting out to make a film about partnerships, about a community, about women and empowerment, There are many different obstacles, both at the logistical end and then also trying to tell a story around how all these things interact. You want to get buy-in from the folks who are funding us. You want to make sure that we're doing diligence on that end, but you also want to be authentic. You want to make sure that you're going in the community and representing that community the best way you know how. And so we rely heavily on partnerships on the ground and also heavily on partnerships in Washington, D.C. to make these films happen. And knowing that, it makes it challenging, sure, but it also makes the kind of process at the end of that, just getting that film completed, even more rewarding when you look at how the different groups are using these films. They're conversation starters. How do these communities live, and how do we make this approach, how do we replicate it? How do we scale it up so that you can actually impact the lives of more people? I mean, there's a big challenge in going into a community like that and getting a sense of the real story. When you go into a community that's a constituent of an integrated program like this, there's so many different pieces of the pie. And so in a film like ours, we're trying to communicate a lot, a ton of different pieces of information, but we're also trying to show how it's integrated, how they're all connected. Why show integration? Some of it seems obvious. Of course it's integrated. Of course we live integrated lives. But that's not the case in terms of the funding. That's not the case sometimes in terms of the different territory NGOs are staking out to continue to have their funding. And so one of the things that we had as a challenge going in is trying to show that this truly is a set of partners trying to not necessarily get the funding cycles or the funding fight, trying not to show that and trying not to highlight those kinds of things, but to highlight how those things, how those programs are becoming more of a symbiotic puzzle than stovepiping again, because it can happen really naturally. And there's got to be a lot of incentives, both in Washington and in these communities, on linking these types of activities and being really evolved on how we see these activities impacting the communities.
Produced by Duke University, online at duke.edu.